All right, we're on proof number 2 and 3. We're going to combine them together. Proof number 2 and 3 that the Torah is actually given by God. It's a divine book. Okay, so what's happening here is we're still continuing with the prophecies and try to see that, to realize that the Torah could not have been written by God, and that those prove are 100% accurate, and that the Torah is 100% from God. Okay, so what's the prophecy? It appears in a few places. The prophecy number 2 is that the Jews are eternal; they will never die. And number 3 is the prophecy that we will always remain small in numbers. Okay, so let me read you first the sources. So the first appears in Devarim, Deuteronomy 28, chapter 28, verse 62. It says, "You shall remain few in number, whereas you could have become as numerous as the stars of the heavens, because you will not obey the voice of the Lord your God." Then another place, it says also in Devarim, chapter 4, number 27, "And you shall remain few in number among the nations where God shall lead you." Then you have also in Jeremiah, where it says in chapter 5, verse 18-19, "But even in those days, declares God, I will not destroy you completely." And then on Jeremiah 46, verse 28 and 27, 28, it says, "But of you I will not make a full end. I will correct you in just measure, but I will not utterly destroy you." It appears also, I don't have the verse here, but also with Avram. Avram asked God, "How do I know that the Jews are going to survive forever?" So God says, "I make an eternal covenant, and I promise you the Jews, even though they go in exile, they're going to survive forever. I'll make a eternal brit with you, an eternal covenant, and they shall not be destroyed." So here we have two things that are unique and that doesn't make sense in terms of history. If you look at how history works, most nation becomes completely assimilated and disappears. There's no more Romans. There's the descendants of the Romans. There's no Romans as Romans. There's no more Egyptians, pharaohs, all that stuff. The Jews are known to be one of the oldest, if not the only longest survival nation that went into exile and survived. So how does it work? How does a nation stay a nation, right? First of all, a nation can only survive if it lives in the same country, and that's from historians. That's what historians say, how a nation can survive in exile. It has to have the same country, same culture, and same languages. If you look at the Jews never stay more than 100 years in the same country. They don't have the same culture, and they don't speak the same language. If Jews all over the world, same way Coca-Cola is all over the world, Jews are all over the world. So this is, now we look at Jewish history. Jews have been persecuted through the past 3,000 years. That means spread out all over. Everybody is trying to erase us and kill us. Anti-Semitism is not something new, always existed. Hitler had the final solution. He tried to kill us completely, and he failed. Everybody, and if you look at what non-Jews say about Jewish history, they all agree there's something weird and wrong with the Jewish history. It doesn't make sense. The most famous one is the quote by Mark Twain. I want to read you. It says like that: "If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1% of the human race. It suggests a nebulous dim puff of star, but lost in the blaze of the Milky Way. Properly, the Jew ought hardly to be heard of, but he's heard of, has always been heard of. He's as prominent on the planet as any other people, and his commercial importance is extravagantly out of proportion of the smallness of his bulk. His contributions to the world's list of great names are also out of proportion to the weakness of his numbers. I believe we have about 60% of Nobel Prizes, right, which is compared to how many Jews there are in the world, which is about 16 million nowadays. It's ridiculous. He has made a marvelous fight in this world in all the ages and has done it with his hand tied behind him. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held the torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now or have vanished. The Jews saw them all, beat them all, and see now what he always was, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of ages, no weakening of his power, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? Right? There's also a famous author, philosopher, Tolstoy, that says basically the same thing. I don't want to read it because it's too long, but check. Tolstoy also says that he doesn't understand why the Jews are still eternal, and he says like that. Just the small quote. He says, the Jew is the emblem of eternity, he whom neither slaughter nor torture of thousands of years could destroy, he whom neither fire nor sword nor inquisition was able to wipe off the face of the earth, he who was the first to produce the oracles of God, he who has been for so long the guardian of prophecy and who transmitted it to the rest of the world. Such a nation cannot be destroyed. So clearly, even from the non-Jewish perspective, from historian, his Jewish history doesn't make sense. We should not be existent. There's also a famous way to look at it, a story to explain it. Imagine there is one little sheep, a white sheep, and there is 70 wolves. And you go to the movie theater and you see that sheep, and the action starts, and you have one wolf trying to run after the sheep and try to kill it, but just before the wolf jump and eat the sheep, heart attack, the wolf dies. And then it continues, the second wolf come, try to eat the sheep, and the wolf run, break its leg, the sheep is safe. And the whole movie goes like that. All 70 all 70 wolves try to eat the sheep and kill it, but they all fail. At the end of the day, you have one little sheep, a little bit bloody, but still alive, and you have a pile next to it with 70 wolves. Now, you try to explain that to anybody, and anybody is going to tell you, this is ridiculous, this story is absurd, there's no such a thing. Well, I'm sure you figured out already, the sheep represents the Jews, and the 70 wolves correspond to the 70 nations that try to kill us. There's probably more, but if you look at history, we never had an army until very recently. We never had tools to defend us. We are still alive after 3,000 years of exile and persecution, and we are growing even more than ever before. So there's something paranormal, supernatural there to the history and the survival of the Jews. It doesn't make sense, and as we say, it's a prophecy. God promises that we're always going to be saved, and actually we say that in the Haggadah, which you could almost say it's a third prophecy. It says, blessed is he who kept his promise to Israel. Blessed is he, this is what has stood up for our fathers and for us. Not one alone has stood up against us, but in every generation they rise up to finish us, and the blessed Holy One saves us from their hand. Right? We say that every Passover. Now, try to look just like for recent years. You go back in history, we had Ahmadinejad trying to kill her, then Saddam, before that Saddam Hussein, before that Arafat, before that Nasser, before that Stalin, before that Hitler, before that the KGB, before that the Tsar, before that the Cossack, before that the Crusade, before that the Romans, before that the Greeks, before that the Persians, before that the Egyptians, and non-stop, for the past 3,000 years, people try to kill us. So we have survived, as the prophecy said, we're still alive. It defies human logic. And number two, what that we said, the third prophecy was that we stay small in number. We never exceeded in history 16 million Jews. Never. And Jews reproduce. It's not like the Chinese, they try to have not more than one and two kids. Jews always have tried to have as many kids as possible, because it's one of the divine commandments to have as many kids as possible. And what, we're still only about 16 million Jews. So God has kept his promise, like it says in the Bible, that we will survive forever, but we'll always stay small in numbers. Make your research, check it out, and you'll see that there's no way to disprove those two prophecies.